Hey, Truth Seekers, welcome back. Zach here. It's March 3rd, 2017. For the last couple of weeks, a number of people have asked if I would make a video exploring the rumors of a false flag attack in Seattle, Washington on March 11th of this year. What I want to do in this video is show you why Seattle is a fitting city for a future false flag attack. As I've mentioned for a number of years, the construction firm that built the World Trade Centers, Magnuson Klemenkic Associates, they are from Seattle, Washington. Of course, 9/11, New York City, the biggest false flag in the history of the nation. And because there hasn't been justice for that day, there will surely be more related false flag attacks in the future. You know, just like we've seen the Boston Marathon bombing and more in the post 9/11 era. So what stands out to me the most about Seattle in 2017 and this spring is its most famous landmark, the Space Needle. In Gematria, Space Needle has a connection to 55, and this year it will turn 55 years old, April 21st, 2017. If you didn't know, the Space Needle was opened for the World's Fair of 1962, World's Fair, World Trade Centers, on the date April 21st. That's the Queen of England's birthday, Queen Elizabeth. Last year we saw Prince die by the numbers on that date. The Space Needle will turn 55, a number that often has to do with sacrifice. I want to show you something I discovered last night looking into 55 more deeply. This is a number we've known its significance for a long time. In case you're new here, let me educate you on 55 in the Fibonacci sequence. If you don't know the Fibonacci numbers, they're said to be the numbers of God, God's mathematical spiral connected to phi, the golden ratio. The sequence goes like this: 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, 89, and so on. If you're good at pattern recognition, you should see how this works. 1 plus 1 is 2. 1 plus 2 is 3. 2 plus 3 is 5. The two numbers create the next number. You see how this works? Goes on to infinity. Things that stand out about this sequence. The sixth time you add the numbers of this sequence, they sum to 33. Special number. 33 in numerology is 3 plus 3 equals 6. The eighth time you add the numbers of this sequence, they sum to 88. Eighth time, 88. The 10th time you add the sequence of these numbers, they sum to 232. And that's so interesting for this reason. There's a relationship between 10, 55, and 232. The 10th time you add the numbers of the Fibonacci sequence, you get 232. Notice that in Gematria, Fibonacci equals 55. So does numerology. The 10th Fibonacci number is 55, the 10th number in the sequence. We've known for a long time that Satan has gematria of 10, 55, and 232. When you add the first 10 numbers of our base 10 counting system, they sum to 55. In numerology, 10 is said to represent God because of this exact relationship between 10 and 55. The numbers 1 through 9 represent the qualities of man. 10 represents God and all of God's creation. Think about it. You add the first 10 numbers, they sum to 55. 55 in numerology is 5 plus 5, which brings you right back to 10. Think about what God is. You know, God represents all of creation. These numbers that are coded into our language, they have mathematical significance, they have real-world significance. The Fibonacci sequence, one of the most relevant number sequences there is, and one that is not taught in the general education system. And that's so sad It's just a sad fact about the world we live in. For those of you who haven't woken up to where you live, pretty much anywhere in this modern world, you live under the New World Order. And the New World Order sees you as a mechanism, a pawn on the chessboard. You're not to be educated. You're not to be enlightened. Your head is to be filled with things that program you for the benefit of the New World Order. Imagine if you learned about mathematics this way as a child. That these sequences exist. That there's this language of numbers in your English language. Imagine if you just learned all this information as a child. It would make things more fascinating, more thought-provoking, more relevant. In our education system, we're taught information without it having any real-world basis or how to apply the knowledge. It's just like, okay, today's today, and we're going to learn this today. And we'll never teach you how it's applied or why it's relevant to your life. That's the way the education system is. And it's all by design. It's meant to keep you in the dark. It's meant to leave you with a few skills to get you by in this world. But anyway, just want to connect the dots more clearly on why these numbers are coded. It's very interesting that they're coded into the name of Satan. In numerology, 10 and 55 are supposed to represent God. Of course, in reverse ordinal gematria, God is 55. So is heaven, so is sky, so is Garden of Eden. Special number here. Spiritual number. And the reason we're talking about it is because the Space Needle will be turning 55 years old this year on the Queen's birthday. Plus, Space Needle has Gematria at 55, which we'll get to. Notice the World's Fair happened in 1962. The Space Needle is in the Seattle Center, which is in between two Seattle neighborhoods. Seattle, like a lot of major cities, is broken up into neighborhood areas. On the north side of the Seattle Center is Lower Queen Anne. On the south side, where the Space Needle is, the Space Needle's in the southeast corner of the Seattle Center complex. The Space Needle's located in the Belltown neighborhood, but the entire complex is between Lower Queen Anne and Belltown. Notice the complex is 74 acres. Seattle's on the 47th meridian, special numbers 74 and 47. With regards to this opening in 62, Queen equals 62, Taurus 62, Mason 62. Queen Elizabeth was the Queen of England back then. She became queen on February 6th, 1952. 2/6 or 6/2. The word queen's 26, the small way, 62, the big way. The queen in 52 had her big ceremony for becoming the queen on June 2nd, a date that can be written 6/2 or 2/6. Anyway, the queen is relevant. The Space Needle opened on the queen's birthday in 62. Oftentimes we're documenting how these, ritualistic events in the news, this propaganda is synced up with the queen, such as the death of Prince last year on the queen's birthday. Here's what's so interesting about March 11th, September 11th, throughout history. We're talking about a potential false flag in Seattle, Washington on March 11th, 2017. The number 311 for March 11th, it's often said is 311. There's a famous band. Their number is 311. They pronounce the band name 311. If you write 311, it sums to 119. Another way of expressing the date, September 11th, 11/9. In history, March 11th and September 11th have often been paired together. We became involved in World War II as a nation on March 11th, 1941, when FDR signed the Lend-Lease Act, which said we could aid and support Allied ships who were fighting, the Axis powers. We opened up our ports to the Allies, as we call them. September 11th, 1941, that same year, that was the date Pentagon construction began. Not by coincidence. It would be attacked 60 years later on September 11th by the numbers. But that date, September 11th, 1941, FDR also gave the order to the U.S. Navy that they could attack Axis ships in Allied waters. So for 6 months prior, we were aiding with our ports, the Allies. Then 6 months later, we were given the order, or the U.S. Navy was, to attack Axis ships, U-boats in Allied waters. And a lot of this is left out of our history book, but it's all very verifiable and recorded history. You know, most of our understanding is we joined World War II after the attack on Pearl Harbor, which happened after both of these things. March 11th, 1941 and September 11th, 1941. Happened the following December 7th. December 7th, also the date we declared war on Austria-Hungary in World War I. Also the date that the first state was established, Delaware, the beginning of a military empire that is the United States of America. In case you didn't know, Pearl Harbor has the same gematria as World War, same gematria as Holocaust, not by coincidence. It's most likely that Pearl Harbor was a false flag. A lot of people say that U.S. planes were painted with the Japanese flag and attacked their own Navy base in Hawaii, which is over by Japan. It's a lot closer to being a Japanese territory than it is a U.S. territory. If you know your U.S. history, Teddy Roosevelt, you know, think about how his family member was in there for the World War. But Teddy Roosevelt said once upon a time that Hawaii must be secured for the U.S.'s military agenda and for securing the benefit of the white race. Those were Teddy Roosevelt's words for why we needed to take the Asian island of Hawaii once upon a time. By the way, Hawaii equals 33 like false flag. Only 3 states sum to 33. The first state, Delaware. The 50th and final state, Hawaii. And the 6th state, Massachusetts, home of the Boston Marathon bombing, false flag by the numbers. Also in history, March 11th, September 11th. The World Trade Centers were proposed March 11th, 1961. They came crashing to the ground September 11th. March 11th, September 11th. It was March 11th, 2002 that the tribute in light began. The 88 purple beams in the New York City skyline that began March 11th. 88 beams was no coincidence. They were purple in color. The word purple in Gematria is 88. Color of royalty. So anyway, March 11th, September 11th, there's rumors there'll be a false flag in Seattle on March 11th. The firm that built the World Trade Centers from Seattle. Will we get the counterpart to 9/11 in Seattle nearly 16 years later? When you write out 16, it sums to 33 like false flag. September 11th, 2017 will be the 16-year anniversary. One of the first things I noticed when I began this Gematria study, when I became aware of Jewish Gematria, was that Seattle and Manhattan were the only 2 cities in the U.S. that had a Jewish Gematria of 321 like a countdown. And I thought that was so fascinating, knowing that the construction firm that built the World Trade Centers in Manhattan was from Seattle. 321. In reverse, 123 is the number for conspiracy. And the date of March 11th, 2017, date with 51 numerology. The word conspiracy, the small way, also sums to 51. We were just talking about how the Seattle Center is 74 acres on the 47th parallel. The World Trade Centers were on the 74th meridian. The third building to fall on 9/11 was Building 7 of 47 floors. Each floor 47,000 square feet. 74, 47 special numbers. Occult 74, Killing 74, Lucifer, Muhammad, Gematria, English, Joshua, which is the English translation of Jesus, Gospel, Messiah, Cross, Jesus, Jewish, Masonic. I maintain that September 11th, 2001 was very much a ritual, in a way, mocking the crucifixion of Jesus. Jesus, the small way, sums to 11. 74 has numerology of 11. 7 plus 4 is 11. The World Trade Centers were massive 11s. They came down on the 11th day of the 9th month. New York's the 11th state. They said the first flight to hit the World Trade Centers was Flight 11. 11, the master number in numerology. The World Trade Centers were 33 years old, coming down on the 74th meridian. Jesus and Cross 74. Remember, in 1968, 911 was made the national emergency dialing code. World Trade Center construction began, and George W. Bush graduated from Yale and Skull and Bones 33 years before 2001. False flag 33. Here's the coordinates for Seattle. 47th parallel, 122nd meridian. Seattle Center, with the alphabetic order, sums to 147. Freemason sums to 147 in reverse ordinal. The Freemasons, the number 47 is very special to them. Freemason and Francis Bacon's also 122. Seattle on the 122nd meridian. Conspiracy in reverse ordinal is 147. Seattle Center, Freemason. Seattle, very Masonic city. The Freemasons, they have something called Euclid's 47th problem about how to establish foundation for a structure. The Freemasons are builders. Framework equals 47, foundation 47, Christian 47, authority 47. The Christian Bible, very Masonic. Have a number of videos on that. With regard to the site opening in 62, the word Mason also has Gematria of 62. It will turn 55 years old, the Space Needle, this year. On the Queen's birthday, Space Needle 55. We just did our lesson on 55. Same information we just covered. What I find interesting is the city of Seattle this year is having its St. Patrick's Day festival on March 11th, despite the festival landing on Friday, March 17th. And perhaps this is just cautionary measures by the city. Maybe they don't want people getting drunk and trashed the weekend it's happening. Maybe they're thinking if they have the festivities the weekend before the actual celebration, there'll be, less arrests, less drunk drivers. If you've never been to Seattle on a Friday night, don't drive drunk in the city. The police are just parked right up. It's just so funny to walk through Seattle on a Friday night. It's like, how dumb are people? There's cops everywhere. Never mind. Just understand, never drive drunk in Seattle. There are cops everywhere, and people never learn. But anyway, this year they're having the St. Patrick's Day festival on March 11th. The name Patrick has Gematria of 33, like false flag. St. Patrick's Day, a lot of green. Seattle's the Emerald City. We just did a video last week on the Wizard of Oz, Emerald City. There's some greater significance here. So the St. Patrick's Day Festival, it will be March 11th in Seattle, 6 days, the weekend before the actual event. We'll see if they give us a Boston Marathon bombing type hoax. And just in case, if you're in Seattle and you're watching this and any of this is worrying you, don't be worried at all. What I am exposing is how the powers that be, they work by long planned out, controlled false flags that very rarely even hurt anyone. I suspect on September 11th, people were hurt. For all of you who say that no one died on September 11th, that's a really idiotic statement to make because you have no idea. I mean, buildings were blown apart, and we saw that debris went flying out from those buildings towards the street of New York. Do you know that anybody wasn't hit by the concrete that came flying out of that building and all the debris? Because that surely would have killed people. False flags can really hurt people. The government doesn't care about human life, but it is in their interest for them to hoax, because when they hoax, people don't really die, which means people are less interested in finding the truth. When you impact real families, there's more people out there who are going to be seeking answers. So don't let this information give you fear. Just let it give you awareness and understanding of how we've been manipulated all throughout history by numbers, by certain dates on the calendar. Excuse me. I don't know if the mic picked that up. I had a little burp there. So anyhow, March 11th, the Seattle Center. It's in the Belltown neighborhood of Seattle. Belltown has the 113 Gematria, like 11/3 for March 11th. 113, favorite number of the Scottish Rite Freemasons, the branch of Freemasonry that runs this nation. Scottish equals 113, mainstream 113, dishonest 113, perjury 113. We've discovered in reverse ordinal, bullshit is 113. So is fiction. 113 often coded around propaganda all throughout history. So we'll see. Seattle Center, March 11th. Here's a few more things that are interesting. The World Trade Centers opened April 4th, 4/4/1973. That was the 5-year anniversary of the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. The number 44 has a lot to do with killing throughout history. Seattle in reverse reduction is 44, and Space Needle in ordinary reduction is also 44. We've seen some symbolism of the Space Needle being destroyed. MTV came out with that new show set in the future. You see the landscape of Seattle, the Space Needle knocked over. There's been some other things over the years. Should mention that the word space sums to 44. Space Needle, space. But 44, throughout history, a number of destruction. Kill, genocide, execution, and more. What a lot of people don't know about Seattle is its original name was Alki. It was first called Alki before they renamed it after Chief Seattle. And oh my goodness, Truth Seeker. Oh my goodness. You know what? As I do this presentation, things jump into my mind that make the date March 11th a lot more real. Chief Seattle sums to 113, and Chief Seattle, I'll just show you this. Date of Chief Seattle speech. Chief Seattle speech date in history. Chief Seattle remembered for this very famous speech about how all things are connected. It's believed this date, the date of the speech, was given March 11th. Let me see. I know it was March 11th in history. I forget what year. But I'd just forgotten about this until just now. Let's see. March 11th, 1854. Is that what it's believed? Huh. Here it is. March 11th. Yeah, almost let that slip away. Chief Seattle's speech. First of all, a lot of people say that they don't even know that this speech really happened. There's this note about here about how it wasn't added to the historical record until October 29th, 1887, which is 33 years after the speech was supposedly given. But the point is, when this speech is noted, it's often said it was given on March 11th, 11/3. It's a great speech, whether it's real or not, about all things being connected in this world. And Chief Seattle's 113. Chief Seattle's also 211 in reverse. That's funny because 211's the 47th prime number, and Seattle's up on the 47th parallel. And you want to talk about life by the numbers. When I moved to Seattle, I really did think it was God that helped me out. When I moved to Seattle at the end of 2006, before I moved up here, I was living in Portland. I had all this research on properties that were for rent in the Seattle area and had a long list of them. Spent days going to all these properties, checking them out. The rents were so high. The places weren't that nice. There was this apartment that cost like $1,500 a month, and it smelled like sewage in there. I couldn't believe it. I was thinking, who would ever pay to live in this place? So I was frustrated. I went through this long list of places, and I didn't really want to live in any of them. And my buddy already had an apartment downtown Seattle, right next to the Seattle Center. And I went over to visit him, and when I was parking and walking to his house, I noticed there was an apartment building across the street, and it had a for rent sign and a door. It was a small complex with doors that opened to the outside. I could see that a door was just wide open, and from the street where I could see the apartment looked vacant, so I thought maybe they were showing off, and that was the open rental space. So I walked up there. The address was 211 Valley Street, apartment number 6. I peeked my head in, and I saw a woman standing in there, and she was doing some work in the kitchen, and I said, I said, by chance, are you the landlord? Is this the apartment that's for rent? And she said, well, I'm the daughter of the landlord, and I'm just, doing some work before we rent this place back out. And I said, well, can I ask you what the rent is here per month? And she said, well, we think our rents are fair. It's $750 a month, and it comes with a parking spot. And just right there, my jaw hit the floor because I'd just been looking at apartments that weren't as nice as this, that smelled awful, that cost $1,500, that were just blocks away. And I thought, what in the world? $750 a month? I said, what do I have to do to rent this place? I'm ready to pay you right now. And she said, well, you're going to need to talk to my father. So I talked to the father, and the father said, father was an old man named Harold. He said, write me a letter and tell me why you want to live here. Tell me why you would be a good tenant. He said, because honestly, a few other people have already inquired, and I was already debating between renting it out to them. So I said, well, you know what? I'm going to go write that letter right now, and I'll be back before you know it because I really want to live in your apartment. I promise I'll be the best tenant ever. And I got the space, 211 Valley Street, when I first moved up to Seattle. And back then, I didn't know a thing about numbers. I didn't know that 211 was the 47th prime, that the Seattle was on the 47th parallel. I don't think I'd ever looked at the coordinates of any city in any of my life. So looking back at all this, it's so fascinating. I never even looked at the name of the street. Is there anything interesting there? Valley. I have birth numerology at 31. But, sometimes these numbers can work out organically. So sorry, we just went off on a big tangent there, but that's the way my videos are, I'm going to have to add that into the post about Chief Seattle. But the city name Seattle comes from the chief. It used to be called Alki. And what's interesting is Seattle, Washington is a mailing address. As you'd write it on an envelope, sums to 137, which is the 33rd prime number. False flag number. New York in reverse ordinal gematria is 33. We often find 33s around the tragedies. So again, the Space Needles, they opened April 21st, 1962. Queen equals 62. They opened on Queen Elizabeth's birthday. That was a date with the 106 numerology. Seattle, Washington also has gematria connection of 106, number of prophecy and destruction. Relevant number that comes up in our research again and again. Last year on March 9th, the big news story was the explosion in Seattle that blew up the Neptune coffee. I have a video if you want to go back and watch that. They said the explosion happened at 1:43 in the morning. They blamed it on a natural gas leak. 1:43. The man who gave us the story, Scoggins, named with 93 gematria. This happened on March 9th, a date that can be written 3/9 or 9/3. The explosion happened right across the street from the Masonic Lodge in the Greenwood neighborhood of Seattle. See if I put a picture of that in this post. Right across the street from this explosion, the Masonic Lodge. Remember, the big G represents 33 in Francis Bacon gematria. But this was a very curious story. Seemed to be a story of Jewish lightning, as they call it. Natural gas leak also has the gematria of 44, the kill number, coded on Seattle and the Space Needle. The original headline, huge explosion rocks Seattle, gematria of 111. The Space Needle opened on the 111th day of the year. That's what day April 21st is. Was this predictive programming for something greater to come? Possibly. We'll find out in time. In Seattle, also curious, we're talking about March 11th and September 11th. There's something called the 9/11 Media Arts Center that happened to open in Seattle August 14th, 1984. Remember, the construction firm that built the World Trade Centers is from Seattle. I find it so interesting that this opened on August 14th, which is the 226th day of the year. Remember, there was the 93 World Trade Center bombing on February 26, 226, that was synced up with September 11, 2001. They say the reason they called themselves the 9/11 Media Arts Center is because their address was 911 East Pine Street. Well, I'm not so sure about that. This building has headquarters at Yale Street and 43rd Street. Let's cover all of this real quick. First, the fact that it opened on the 226th day of the year. If you write out 226, it sums to 93. 93 is the number for Saturn, the keeper of time. The word planet has Jewish gematria of 226. The 93 World Trade Center bombing was on February 26th. They just told us the blind sheik died 2 weekends ago. The blind sheik, the mastermind of the 93 World Trade Center bombing. This is all propaganda by the numbers. Islamic extremists are not responsible for any of the terrorism in the United States. Only Freemasons and Zionist Jews are, who abide by this numerological code. Anyway, what are the odds that they open this 9/11 Media Arts Center on the 226th day of the year in light of the firm that built the World Trade Centers being from Seattle, in light of the significance of these numbers? As for 911, it is the 156th prime number. The construction firm that built the World Trade Centers has 156 name gematria. When you write out 33, it sums to 156. False flag in Jewish gematria is 156. False flag in English reductions 33. How perfect is it that this firm built these World Trade Centers 33 years before their demise, the same year 911 was made the National Emergency Dialing Code? And as we know, on 9/11, what happened on the TV was media arts. We were given computer graphics, fake planes, a massive, long-planned conspiracy. Freemasonry's worldwide. We're talking about Freemasonry within the U.S. You know, Seattle's one corner of the nation, New York's the other. Is this coincidence? As for this being on 43rd Street and Yale Street, its current headquarters, George W. Bush was the 43rd president of the United States. He went to Yale, where Skull and Bones is. Yale equals 43. Remember when Bush was elected, it came down to Florida, where his brother was the governor. His brother was the 43rd governor of Florida. Their father was the 41st president, and Skull and Bones equals 41, just like USA. So the 9/11 Media Arts Center on Yale and 43rd. Unreal. Also, this opened in 1984, United States of America 84, Masonry 84, Zionism 84, very special number. Number of wrongdoing all throughout history. Africa was carved up by the European powers in 1884. It was a date with 84 numerology. In that year, where powers that shouldn't be became involved in a conflict that turned into a snowball that led to World War I over dividing up the boundaries of Africa. Point is, 84, relevant number throughout history. The 9/11 Media Arts Center opened in 84. And again, just down the street, Magnuson Klemenkic Associates, the firm that built the World Trade Centers. I love that they operate in 47 states. From the 47th parallel. And with regards to their name in Gematria, there's a lot to appreciate. It's more than just the 156. Again, 911, the 156th prime number. Remember in Jewish Gematria, Tisha B'Av, which is the destruction of the two temples, equals 911. Anyway, Magnuson Klemenkic Associates has Gematria of 102. The 9/11 attack lasted 102 minutes. United States of America also has Gematria of 102. So does Al-Qaeda. 102-minute attack. Gematria of 111. New York equals 111. September 11th, the day that leaves 111 days left in the year. 147, we covered this number, coded into Seattle Center, Freemason conspiracy, and also 156, 911, the 156th prime. They were founded in 1923, 19 plus 23, 42. Independent way to find the year numerology. Washington, the 42nd state, Freemason 42. Named after George Washington, the Freemason. So real quick, that's mostly what's interesting about Seattle. Seattle, its relationship with the World Trade Centers, March 11th, September 11th, Magnuson Klemenkic Associates, this 9/11 Media Arts Center being in Seattle. The southern neighbor, Portland State. One of my followers, Bertley Gerba, he just pointed this out to me. Portland State University has a very interesting mural on their wall at Newberger Hall, which happens to have the gematria of 223, number of masonry. They have this mural right here. We've seen murals like this, Denver Airport, Bank of America Tower in Charlotte. A lot of interesting murals out there. Hands on the 3 and 6. When you sum 1 through 36, it totals 666. This is in Portland, Oregon. This site right here would be somebody looking from the Portland area out towards the mountains. This is supposed to be Mount Hood. Mount Hood, the closest mountain to Portland. If you've never been to Portland, beautiful city. You can see a lot of mountains on a clear day. The mountainous Pacific Northwest. But anyway, this mural in this hall with the 223 gematria, Portland is the home of the top-off 4 drill, which took place in 2007. It was mostly conducted in Portland, Oregon. It was conducted in 3 places in the world simultaneously. Portland, Oregon's the 33rd state, remember that. Phoenix, Arizona, which is on the 33rd parallel, and also Guam, which is on the 144th meridian. The drill was called Top-Off 4. Top-Off has the gematria of 33, like Oregon being the 33rd state. This was to simulate a nuclear weapons attack in an urban environment. It's interesting that Top-Off also sums to 84. This was the biggest drill to date in the history of the nation simulating such a scenario. If you look at the history of the nuclear and atomic weapons program, has a lot to do with 33. And let's not forget that the program began in Washington State at Hanford. The Manhattan Project, Manhattan, the World Trade Center's ground zero. If you don't know the definition of ground zero, it means where a nuclear or atomic bomb detonates above or below ground. Manhattan, ground zero, weapons testing programs in this nation, which began in the Pacific Northwest. And we're asking, is the next major false flag going to be in the Pacific Northwest? Very possibly. With regards to Portland, its nickname is Rip City. And I started to think about this a lot in 2007 when we had the Top-Off 4 drill. I had just moved up to Seattle. I was in Portland. Then the Top-Off 4 drill came. And, since I've talked about my personal life, I've explained that my sister and I don't get along. Back then, I did say to my sister, because my sister's been rich. I mean, they have so much money, they could go retire and live on an island for the rest of their life. I said to her back then, I said, Jen, pay attention to this drill they just had in our city. Our government's known for foreshadowing their plans. If you've never been to Portland, Oregon, it's a very small city. It's a beautiful city. It's ripe for growth. It's been growing rapidly in the last decade. But the way the roads were built, the freeway, there is no room for expansion. And Portland has become one of the worst cities to drive in the last decade because there's been so much growth there. They have a good mass transit system, but the roads are just screwed. There's nowhere to expand. I mean, Portland would be the perfect city to level and start over again. There's not that big of buildings there anyway. But I really started to think about the city's nickname, Rip City, our nickname. We're so proud of that there. Portland Trailblazers games, everyone's screaming out Rip City. But think about it. Rip. Rest in peace. What we know about 33 and the powers that shouldn't be and predictive programming, X might mark the spot for Portland, Oregon at some day in the future. And in fact, I haven't even looked at my city since becoming aware of this reverse gematria. Oh God, Truth Seeker. Portland even has the 44 in reverse. It's wild. 116's 911 upside down. So, have no fear, but be aware. And for anyone's long-term well-being and sanity, I think if you can, you should plan to get out of this nation at some point. Find a better place to live. There's surely better places to live in the world than the U.S. Of course, leaving your country is difficult. Family, job, culture, language, and more. But those of us who live here who are awake, this is a horrible place to live. A building police state, and so many other things. In the future, as they build their police state, they're going to need to do their false flags. They're going to need to take away more rights. This is not a place anyone should want to live. And that's what I was explaining to my sister in 2007. No matter what happens, take your family somewhere else. There's better places for your children to be raised. That was a conversation we had going on 10 years ago now. But anyway, closing thoughts, Truth Seeker. There will be more false flags for as long as the powers that shouldn't be are the powers that be. And understanding the way they operate is crucial. Don't make yourself paranoid over looking at dates and theorizing on when the next attack might come. In all likelihood, the next attack will be as lame as the Boston Marathon bombing. But no doubt, at some point they will have things just as bad as September 11th. And I think on September 11th, a lot less people died than we were told, but I'm sure people did die. That was a massive attack, massive explosions, massive damage. And the next time they do one of their false flag stunts, again, could be the same type of thing. That was a long video. Didn't mean to make it so long, but there was a lot of information to cover. The one piece to really take away is what we covered in the beginning with the Fibonacci sequence in 55, the significance of these numbers. Remember, the powers that shouldn't be, they worship Satan, and they do things by the numbers. And the more we study, the more we understand about their code, and I think this is a very significant part of it. All right, Truth Seeker, until next time.